The new fantasy football season is upon us. What players should we be excited to target in our fantasy drafts this summer? What storylines from the offseason will affect this year's fantasy season? And what is Fantasy Football Fellowship all about? Find out next. Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast, where we unpack fantasy, faith, and life. I'm Bryce Johnson, joined in studio with Tripp Smith, and we are your fantasy coaches here to encourage you and help you win while you play fantasy football with purpose all season long. And man, are we fired up that fantasy is back, that Fantasy Football Fellowship is back, that this podcast is back. And so here we are. And so today's special episode will include an overview of the fantasy season, our approach to the fantasy season, Fantasy Football Fellowship. If you're new to the ministry, we want to tell you all about this podcast, but also the resources that we have made available for you and your league to play fantasy football with purpose all season long. And so we're going to get into all of that today. For those of you that are listening or watching on our Unpacking It platforms, hello. We love you. We appreciate you. And for many of you that have maybe been listening to Unpacking It for the last few months and you're a new listener, we wanted to introduce you to Fantasy Football Fellowship as well. And so we've made today's episode available kind of on all of our different channels and different podcast feeds. And so if you are listening on Unpacking It, be sure to go over to Fantasy Football Fellowship, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts, go search Fantasy Football Fellowship and you'll find us and be able to subscribe because in a couple of weeks, the fantasy show will shift kind of over to Fantasy Football Fellowship, and the Unpacking It podcast in sort of normal format will return in a couple of weeks. And actually, we'll be back with our summer movie series. So get excited about that. I think we're kicking off with Little Giants, so a football movie from my childhood, which is a classic. So make sure you subscribe to the Unpacking It podcast if you're listening to us on Fantasy Football Fellowship. So hopefully it's not too confusing. It's one ministry. It's Unpacking It Ministries. But every fall, and summer as well, we incorporate Fantasy Football Fellowship into our overall ministry efforts. And so this is a key part of Unpacking It Ministries. Year-round, though, our passion is to see sports fans following Jesus. And so we want to challenge, encourage, and inspire sports fans to follow Jesus and become more like him. And so we've got devotionals, podcasts, Fantasy Football Fellowship. And then also, we just released the latest sports devotional book. So it's the Sports Devotional NFL edition, 32 NFL teams, 32 devotionals, 32 lessons about life and faith. So be sure to check that out on thesportsdevotional.com as well. And so here on the show today and all season long, we will offer fantasy advice, tips, tricks, strategies, and not so much tricks, but tricks of the trade, so to speak. I don't know why that trick is a funny word, but anyway, so we consider ourselves more so fantasy coaches. I've been playing for over 20 years. Back in 2004 was my first season, so a long time. It's been a long time. So we've got some experience. I've got my fantasy rings here on the table, here on the desk here in the studio, and so we're coming to you from the Unpacking It Ministry studio. And I am thrilled to say hello to Tripp Smith, who is also here in studio. And Tripp, it's great to have you back. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be back. And thanks for having me, Bryce. I walked into the studio this morning and I said, I love fantasy football. And then I hear that music at the beginning of the episode and I can just feel myself getting excited. That music gets me pumped. I love to talk fantasy football with you. Yeah, just to reiterate what you just said, I mean, last season was my first season running a Fantasy Football Fellowship League. Did it with some buddies at my church. We had some guys who were a little more involved in the church and some guys who were newer, looking to make friends. And it was just so fun. the way that Unpacking It and the way that you help us to manage those leagues, help us to commission those leagues, give us those devotionals that sometimes they just are really simple, short conversations with friends and brothers in Christ about spirituality, and sometimes they lead to something much deeper. And so I'm a huge believer in Unpacking It in Fantasy Football Fellowship. I love fantasy football, but even more than that, I love doing fantasy football with friends, talking football with you, with buddies, and the fact that we get to segue that into our relationship with Jesus and what it means to follow him together is just something that made last season for me, I think, in spite of the poor performance of a lot of my teams, made last season maybe my most fun season of fantasy football ever because it had that added layer that the Fantasy Football Fellowship gives. So I love to be here with you, brother.
No, I appreciate it. And so Tripp joined the show last summer and was with us all season long. And so had a blast and thrilled to have you back here on the show as we continue to build this podcast. And really, we want to walk the journey of the fantasy season with you as a listener, as a partner with us here in Fantasy Football at Fantasy Football Fellowship. And so the way things are structured, so we'll start with the podcast. So throughout the summer, we'll be given draft tips and looking at ADPs and rankings and different kind of philosophies for putting together a team. And so we'll share our experience with that. And our mantra here is we're not always right, but we hope to be convincing. And so that's kind of the point of this. But we're just going to talk about the journey of fantasy. So this time of year, it's the initial prep. And so we'll get into that a little bit later on this show. But how do you prepare for drafts? What is the right sort of approach to even preparation? And then what is a part of this show all season long is we will do breakouts. And so that's kind of our term for the fantasy concepts that relate to life and faith. And so for those of you that have been a part of Fantasy Football Fellowship, you know this. But I just want to kind of get everybody else up to speed. And this is sort of our welcome episode, just so that we kind of know where we're starting from and what we're all about as the season gets going here. But basically, we want to be in the conversation of fantasy. And so like Tripp and I live and breathe Jesus first, our family, and then fantasy football is right there, maybe at a distant third, but it's in the mix. And so we're right there with you. And so it's fun to talk about. It's fun to talk about the players. It's fun to talk about different league settings. And Tripp and I were just talking about that before the show, different ways to structure leagues. So we'll get into some of that this year. But most importantly, we want this to be a different type of podcast too, to where you leave feeling encouraged. You leave inspired. You leave viewing Fantasy Football Fellowship through a different lens, because this isn't just about fantasy. We're not doing this just about fantasy football. We're not chasing the, hey, I'm trying to be on, ESPN as a fantasy football analyst. That's not the hope. My hope is that people know Jesus, follow Jesus, and we're using fantasy football as a way to do that. And also, I think I've learned some things over the years with fantasy, and I think I can help you play a little bit better this year. How about that? Is that fair? I don't have all the answers, but we've got a few tips and I don't know, tricks. Do we call them tricks? I don't know.
I like tricks.
You like tricks? You okay with tricks?
I'm trying to bring some tricks to the conversation here.
Try to trick some league mates. So basically, each show we'll do some analysis, but then we'll have a breakout starting next week. We'll start our breakouts with the topic of forgiveness. And so next week, you'll want to listen in. What players are you willing to forgive? What players are you unwilling to forgive? And then we'll take a look in our own lives. What does it mean to forgive others that have hurt us, that have caused us pain? And why do we forgive? How can we forgive? So that'll be next week's breakout. But my passion for this ministry, it really began 20 years ago or 20 plus years ago when my young life leader introduced me to fantasy football. And so, he was using it as a way to, connect with me and minister to me as I'm a senior in high school. And so now all these years later, we are using fantasy football as the conversation starter. And so what we've done is we've created this whole fantasy resource. The podcast is a part of it, but it goes beyond that, where we encourage leagues to meet regularly all season long. We call them league meetings. And so it's fun to play fantasy football, right? You talk a little trash with your buddies. You're competing against each other. For those of us that aren't playing sports anymore, this is our chance. This is our outlet to compete, to have the camaraderie. And so what we've said is, hey, you're already in a fantasy league, or go start a fantasy league with kind of fantasy football fellowship in mind, but meet each week. And here's what you'll do. You'll discuss the weekly breakout. We will provide the league leader in your league. And so you could be the league leader, get it going, start it up and say, hey guys, we're going to meet. We're going to talk about this every week. So you're going to talk fantasy. You're going to talk life. You're going to talk faith. You're going to grow in your understanding of the Bible, grow in your relationship with Jesus, and build meaningful relationships. It's one thing to be on the surface with guys that you're in the league with, and you talk fantasy during the season, and then fantasy season's over, and then, oh wait, we have nothing to talk about. Or you use fantasy all season long, strengthen the connection, but then you go deeper. And you go, let's talk about what's really going on. Marriage, parents, being a parent, being what's going on at work, the struggles at work, the challenges at work. All of those kinds of things, those are the opportunities to discuss. And then, okay, what does the Bible actually say about the challenges that we're facing in all of those areas? And what does it really mean to walk with Jesus? And so we're using fantasy concepts, things that you experience throughout the fantasy season, that I experienced throughout the fantasy season, trades, waiver wire, the feelings, the emotions, the highs and lows of the fantasy season. All of those things are relatable from a fantasy standpoint, but actually translate into our experience of life and faith and the faith journey that we're on. And so we've, through God's power and the Holy Spirit within us, has allowed us to sort of figure out how the connection is made. And so each week, we'll talk about it here on the podcast. You'll talk about it in your league meetings. And our hope is that you'll experience just a lot more meaning and purpose all season long. And so how do you get involved with Fantasy Football Fellowship? You go to fantasyfootballfellowship.com. You sign up for a free membership. Because of donors, we have made this resource available for free. And so individuals support us, churches support us, you can support us so that we can continue to get this available out there to more and more individual leagues and also churches. And so we've made this resource really designed for churches as well, to say, hey, let's start a league at our church. Let's get some people that maybe aren't necessarily in a life group already, in a small group already, maybe come once in a while to church. But man, you let them know fantasy is an opportunity. You get them in the league and say, hey, we're going to meet every week, and it's an opportunity for you to get to know some other people in the church. And so that's our heartbeat here too. My church, we're looking to run 5 or 6 leagues this year. And so, the league that I've been doing for the last couple of years, tremendous fruit, awesome relationships, really cool to see guys grow. And so I've seen it firsthand in personally, but then also the stories that I hear from churches and leagues that participate in Fantasy Football Fellowship. God is moving through it. And so we're excited about it. And so want you to be a part of it. And so I hope that you'll listen to the podcast all season long. And then I hope you'll get your league signed up, get your church signed up, and or, run multiple leagues, right? And then also lastly, if you want to participate with us as well and be in one of our leagues that we run through Unpacking It, that's another option too. And so if you want to, be kind of in listener leagues, that kind of thing, more information will be available in the coming weeks. So that's the story. That's what's going on. And so we've been doing this for a number of years and excited for where things are at as we head into a new season. But again, go to fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Make sure you're subscribed to the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast, the YouTube channel, our social media, and looking forward to engaging with you all season long. All right, Trip, let's get some analysis going here, some predictions, some excitement. And we have to start with the players in July that you're most excited about. And so, and actually maybe we'll pause. We'll get to that in a moment. Just your initial thoughts heading into a new fantasy season. just sort of overview, the initial mock drafts that you've done, the initial rankings that you've seen, thinking about how last season ended. Where's sort of your mind and heart heading into a new fantasy season?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think I remember going into last season with a very wide receiver heavy sort of philosophy of drafting. And I think last year in a lot of ways was sort of like revenge of the bell cow running back, right? I mean, we saw these guys, most notably Saquon Barkley, but you saw these older running backs who were on their second teams or had new contracts on new teams. And I would go so far as to say that if you didn't have one of those stud RBs, you didn't make it to the later rounds of the playoffs in your fantasy league. And I went way too light on running back, way too heavy on wide receiver. My approach this year is going to be a much more sort of balanced roster. You're always looking to hit like one of those guys like a Jaden Daniels, just somebody who super exceeds the expectations that we have for them. And I think that there are some rookies to be interested in and to pay attention to this season. I got my eye on a couple rookies that are going to have that difficult adjustment period for the first few weeks of the season, but I think are going to make a difference on people's teams later in the season. But yeah, for me, the big takeaway is I love wide receivers. My love for dynamic wide receivers, even diva wide receivers, is well documented on this very podcast. But I'm looking for a more balanced approach to roster building this season. And as it pertains to the offseason, for me, that means just not getting excited about these hype stories that are just going to be published throughout the summer, especially as teams start training camp. You've got to remember there are these beat writers that are embedded with every team who have to write a story every day and have to get clicks on that story. And they're going to try to hype you up with something exciting about a player that you haven't thought very much about. It's not that you don't want to pay attention to those things, but you want to have a balanced, steady approach to building a great fantasy football team. And that's what we're going to help you do here on the podcast. So
absolutely. So a couple things. We'll talk rookies next week. And then also once the season gets going, if you've listened to the show for a while, we've got some fun segments that will be back. We may throw a little bandwagon riding, some would you rather here in the summer. But we'll have fantasy shenanigans. We'll have, is he legit? Who is that? So some of the fun elements of our show will be returning, and I think we've got a new Aaron, our producer, and I worked on a new audio piece that will debut. That came together pretty nicely. I can't think of what it is at the moment, but
no, that's a perfect teaser. Don't tell us.
Yeah, I got to remember what segment it was, yeah. But it's fun. It's a good one. So we'll get excited about that. You mentioned Jaden Daniels. I think that's one of the key storylines this season, because I was just reading about CJ Stroud this morning. So 2 years ago, CJ Stroud came in as a rookie, blew the league by storm, fantasy ramifications, of course, with the season that he had. He had a sophomore slump. What do we do with CJ Stroud? I'm in on CJ Stroud, but that's a big question. Jaden Daniels came in, exceeded expectations, was awesome, won fantasy leagues last year for people. The value that you got with Jaden Daniels was unbelievable. Does he do that again? Because now you've got to pay the premium to draft him. Is there a rookie quarterback that will fall into that category? Or even last year, Bo Nix was pretty solid. Does he build on that? Or does he have a sophomore slump? And so those kind of the young quarterbacks are interesting. And then also the young tight ends. Last year we saw Brock Bowers. He was awesome. The year before we saw Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta had a sophomore slump. Does Brock Bowers have a sophomore slump? Is there a rookie tight end that comes in and has an immediate impact? So that to me, those questions at those two positions are intriguing. And then which we'll talk next week about Ashton Genty, but a top 10 running back, what do we do with that? Does he become a top 10 fantasy running back this season? And then what about the hyped rookies from last year? Guys like Marvin Harrison. Does he bounce back? Rome Odunze, little glimpse here or there. Now are we all excited about him with Ben Johnson? So some really fun storylines and things to consider as we head into this new season. But I love the return of the bell cow running back, as that's
you really benefited from that last season.
I did.
It hurt me in a major way. So I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Your point about the quarterbacks and the tight ends is just well taken, man. A lot of what you're trying to figure out, we all know the like 4 to 6 quarterbacks that are just they're gonna be the best quarterbacks in the NFL, right? These guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. Like we know the solid QBs. What you're trying to figure out with those younger guys and those middle tier guys is how are they going to develop from season to season, and that's just something that is hard to determine. You swing and miss a lot when you're trying to figure that out. I mean, I was a big believer in Kyler Murray last season, and just the question of his development over the course of his career. And I saw something on X or Reddit or something about Jaden Daniels. I don't know if you saw the story of Jaden training on VR game tape and playing. So he's wearing a VR headset and he's playing it at like 1.5 speed. Right, the way you listen to your podcast, the way you listen to this podcast on 1.5 speed.
Hey, slow us down.
Slow
us down.
Yeah, that's right. He's watching sped up game tape to prepare for these games so that it feels slow to him when he gets on the field. And I saw a tweet on X or something that was Jaden Daniels trains on high-speed VR game tape. Kyler Murray trains on Call of Duty. You know, you're trying to figure out how are these guys going to develop, and with QB and tight end especially, those technical positions, it's hard to figure it out. I'm a big believer in Brock Bowers this season. I'll just say that.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. But yeah.
Okay. Well,
not worried about a setback or a slump for him. So
okay. Well, let's jump right into that, and because next week we'll also talk about the NFL teams that will sway the NFL season or the fantasy season one way or the other. The teams that we just the number of outcomes, it's all over the board, and there's a lot of debate. So those teams, and to me, the Raiders are in that conversation with a new regime and all that. And so let's sort of we got so much to get to. We got a whole off season. I'm just so excited. It's like, all right, what direction do we go? I just want to hear initially though the players you're most excited about. So let's start there, and then we'll talk about kind of some of the off season moves, coaching-wise, free agency, trades that will affect the fantasy season. But let's start with just a couple names that initial thoughts, mock drafts, rankings, you're most excited about drafting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so my comment about Kyler Murray notwithstanding, I do think, again, unless I get a golden opportunity to take one of those elite quarterbacks a little bit behind ADP, which does sometimes pop up when you're drafting, I think Kyler has talked a lot about taking this offseason seriously and wanting to run more this season. So I think that bodes well for him and Marvin Harrison. So I'm projecting a little bumps for both of them this year. If Kyler runs the way that he used to, he could be an absolute steal in drafts. A guy that I think I'm a big believer in and I'm probably going to have on a lot of my teams, and this is a little bit painful to say, is Dak Prescott. I think the story on Dak.
I tend to agree with you.
The story on Dak is that when the Cowboys make it to the real NFL playoffs, they always disappoint. They always underperform. I think at this point that is a confirmed and valid storyline, and Stephen A. Smith on ESPN loves to further promote that storyline. But I think that Dak in the regular season is a really good quarterback, and now they've added George Pickens to that team. I think they've got an interesting backfield. I just think, regardless of what you think that he's going to do in the real NFL playoffs, I think he's going to score a lot of points in fantasy football this season. So as I paid attention to, in spite of the Cowboys being kind of a train wreck and Jerry Jones always doing what Jerry does, I think that Dak is going to have a major comeback season this year, and he's a guy that I'm going to have a lot on my teams for, like, where his ADP is as a quarterback.
Absolutely. I have a feeling he will rise the rankings, but absolutely, first glance, wait, you can get Dak in the 9th, 10th, 11th round type of thing? Right. That's a steal. Because we're talking about CeeDee Lamb's going to be a top 5 pick, top 7 pick anyway. And who's his quarterback? So I'm with you on that one. I already mentioned I'm in on CJ Stroud with a bounce back year. I've believed in Justin Herbert for a while. I just think with another year with Harbaugh and the offense getting better, the Chargers taking the step this year. I think there was unrealistic expectations that Harbaugh was going to come in and the Chargers were going to go to the Super Bowl the first year. And give it a moment to grow. But they showed glimpses of what they can be. They took a step forward. I think they'll take the next step this year. They'll unleash Justin Herbert more, and you can get Herbert so late. And I think he's got the talent and the ability to be a top 7 quarterback in fantasy, and a couple new weapons we'll have to talk about. But I think he's going to be better. He's a guy that I'm going to be targeting this year. You know who I also like? So going into last year, I was never in on this guy and avoided the Jets. I avoided the Aaron Rodgers Jets. But I like the narrative of Justin Fields going to the Jets to play with Garrett Wilson, his former teammate at Ohio State. Wilson was very good last year, despite all the craziness. He's a highly talented wide receiver, and right now he's being drafted as wide receiver 14. I think he can hit that for sure and exceed that. I drafted him last year, and I liked the experience. I thought he was pretty good. It was funny. It was one of those picks last year where I go, the value's too good. I don't really want to draft Wilson, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then he was awesome for me, for the most part. The Jets were tough last year. But anyway, so I like Garrett Wilson. I'm in on him this year. And then you will hear me talk about him all season or all offseason long. Jacoby Myers. You like Brock Bowers. I like Jacoby Myers. All he's done with the Raiders has been productive. And you can draft him as wide receiver 40? Are you kidding me? He's a wide receiver 3, no question. But really, he'll be a wide receiver 2 this year, if not better. So he's the guy. Unless the Raiders trade for somebody, he's the guy. So I'm in on him. And then also, I was out on Aaron Jones last year. He was all right for Minnesota. He was good. But I like Jordan Mason coming in there, and you can draft him as RB31. Yes, please. I love the potential, the upside. I thought he ran so well in San Francisco, and I know any running back you put back there, it's like, oh yeah, of course, in San Francisco, they're running well. I like the way Mason runs. Like he was legit. He was a legit fill-in for CMC, and the eye test, I'm in on Mason. I like the fit. Minnesota went out to get him, so I'm in on him. Last one, tight end Tucker Kraft. He was really good last year. Very productive, solid. I think the Packers still need him to be a key weapon. I know they've beefed up their wide receiver room, but still, at tight end, Tucker Kraft, you can draft him as tight end 12. I think he'll exceed that. I love the value there. I'll be going back to the well with Tucker Kraft this year. So, any thoughts on any of those guys?
Well, I mean, Jordan Love has been talking about Tucker Kraft and getting him more involved in the offense. So the quarterback of the Packers agrees with you on Kraft. We're going to talk about this next episode, so I'll save this. But I'm a big believer in Matthew Golden as well on that Packers team. I just think I'm going to do what I do most seasons, which is take one of those late tight ends and hope that I hit. And Tucker Kraft is one of those guys that I'm going to take a swing at. Brenton Strange with the Jaguars, I think could be a sleeper tight end pick this year. And then the one other guy that I'll add to that list that I've been a fan of for a long time is Isaiah Likely. I think with the way, this hurts me to say it, the way that Mark Andrews let the Ravens down last year in a major, he literally dropped the ball multiple times. And I thought coming into last season that Isaiah Likely might be a better tight end than Mark Andrews already. And with another year of age there for Andrews, I'm gonna be holding off on tight end. And what I'm not gonna do is take Kyle Pitts. What I am gonna do is look at guys like Tucker Kraft, Brenton Strange, Isaiah Likely, and just hope that I can hit. I like your Kraft take there a lot. And Jordan Love is talking him up pre-training camp, so that's a good sign.
There are a number so far in mock drafts. The tight ends that you can get late, a lot of upside, and a couple of those rookies are going late. The hype isn't around them yet. We'll see. Which we'll talk about again next week. We're teasing this next week's episode. Whew, you better be ready for that.
Yeah, it's gonna be
fun. But no, so some good guys at the tight end spot. Even Travis Kelce is falling. The Travis Kelce hype is low. Some people were burned by him last year. So he might need to be a part of our forgiveness segment. I didn't really get burned by him last year. I don't think I was in on him last year. I was in on him the year before and got burned. So it's been a couple years where his production has definitely been declining, but I feel like he's got like one more big year in him. And I feel like the hunger from losing the Super Bowl and having a couple down seasons, the motivation, we're kind of settled into the Taylor Swift stuff. Like, it is what it is versus him dealing with it, I hope. Now, you always run the fear of him breaking up. I'm always worried about the breakup there, but maybe that motivates him. Maybe it motivates him. I don't know.
He gets angry.
I feel like that's always been looming there. So anyway, but Travis is another guy to keep an eye out for.
I just think Travis Kelce is really enjoying his life. Okay, so like the drama and the attention about the Taylor Swift thing, maybe that's over. Maybe that's an old news story at this point. I just think that Travis likes dating Taylor Swift, doing the podcast with his brother, being a celebrity, cereal commercials, whatever thing that he's doing. I don't even know if he's going to pay attention until they're in the playoffs, So I think I'm actually probably not forgiving Travis Kelce, but.
Okay, that's fair. I think we'll see, I'm playing mind games at this point in the offseason, but.
That's right, yeah.
Last year, the Chiefs coasted in the regular season and lost in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They might need to come out guns a-blazing and put together a productive regular season and still build toward the playoffs. It's still all about Super Bowls at this point, but Mahomes had a down year. Yeah. And I think in fantasy, I think he'll be a little bit of a discount.
For sure.
And I think I'll roll the dice on him maybe in a league or two as well. Because they got some weapons in the passing game, and I think they're going to be better in the regular season.
Xavier Worthy is a dynamic player. It sounds like Rashee Rice is going to be healthy, I think.
He's been a nightmare so far, but yes.
I don't think that he's going to get suspended this season. It doesn't sound like. So he may play most of the season, if not all of it. And then I think Hollywood Brown is going to be healthy this year.
I like Brown.
Yeah, me too. I actually think that they're going to be a wide receiver-oriented offense this year, and maybe that hurts Travis Kelce a little bit. But I would love to have Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, or Hollywood Brown on my team. And that means that Mahomes is going to have a bounce-back season, score some more points for you in fantasy this year.
I think so, because last year I was out on the Chiefs because I didn't want to pay the Super Bowl premium for those guys, which I guess ended up being a wise decision. Whereas this year, I think there's a little bit of a discount with the loss. Now, oftentimes teams that lose in the Super Bowl do not have a good follow-up season. I think the Chiefs are different because they've won a couple beforehand. How many have they won? 3? They've won 3?
He's already won 3 and been to 5. Is
Gosh,
that right?
It's unbelievable. It's hard to wrap your mind around. But we're trying to get to fantasy championships. So the next topic I want to get into as we look at the offseason and sort of get caught up and get our mind wrapped around this new season is, okay, what took place in the offseason? Where are the changes that we need to identify as fantasy managers that will benefit, or maybe situations we want to run from? Not so much talking rookies, that's next week, but today the offseason moves, kind of trades, free agency, and the domino effects as well. Coaching changes as well. But let's start with DK Metcalf. So he leaves Seattle, goes to Pittsburgh, which then led to George Pickens, who you've already acknowledged you're in on, goes to Dallas.
I want to be clear. I'm not in on George Pickens.
You're in on Dak.
I'm in on the effect that it has on the Dallas offense, assuming that he can keep his drama, his diva-ness under control. I don't know that I want to draft Pickens.
I've already been wrestling with this. I think I'm in on Pickens.
Okay.
I think so. I think it'll be probably more along the boom or bust.
Right.
So we'll get into our boom or bust strategy in putting together a roster. I don't want more than one, but I'm okay having George as one of those guys.
Yeah, I like that. Okay.
Talk about forgiveness. The one year, this was a couple of years ago. This is one of my famous fantasy stories, but there was a game late in the season where he did not block on a play.
Yep, I
remember that. It was a key moment. It was a key, I can't remember the full scenario, but he did not block. And I didn't like that.
You benched him. I remember this. Yeah.
Because I love wide receivers that are willing to block for their teammates. Even though it doesn't help me fantasy-wise, I respect it, and I want to keep them on my team. So out of principle, I decided to bench George Pickens in the fantasy playoffs when he scored 40 points. Mm-hmm. He scored 40 points on my bench. I'm pretty sure I lost that matchup, and I'm gonna have to forgive him though if I do want to draft him this season.
Yeah.
So that
hurt is still there for you.
It's still there. It's deep. That's a deep one. But I still stand by my principle. but it was an unfortunate outcome. The domino then, so George goes to Dallas. Then Aaron Rodgers, because DK is in Pittsburgh and because there's no other option for Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers goes to Pittsburgh. Now, Pickens is gone. They needed to get another weapon. They go trade for Jonnu Smith. They also keep Pat Freiermuth. So talk about tight ends. I mean, I think that hurts both those guys fantasy-wise. But now the domino effect, so now that affects Freiermuth, who just signed a new deal, who we were kind of excited about, thinking, oh, okay, now Freiermuth is sort of that number 2 weapon in that Pittsburgh offense. Nope, not so fast. Lee Corso's final year. But so then Jono goes there. Well, Metcalf leaves Seattle. Cooper Kupp then replaces DK. Well, JSN is still there. We got excited. DK leaves. Now JSN's the guy. Well, wait, no, now Cooper Kupp is there. Are you keeping up? Are you keeping up, fantasy manager? It is a lot. It's a lot to navigate here. And so out of all of that domino, which of those players are you most excited about?
I want to ask you a question, okay, because there's a player that you didn't mention that I'm hesitant to mention.
Okay.
His name is Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
The reason I'm hesitant to mention is because it's just like how much he has been talked about this offseason, last offseason, every offseason. There's sort of this collective hallucination, I think, about Rodgers. I want to. What do you think?
That's an interesting word to use. With,
right. Good point.
Him.
Yeah, I didn't.
Did you see his documentary?
Yeah. No pun intended. But yeah. He's having hallucinations. But what do you think that the Steelers' expectation for their season is? Like what do the Steelers think that they are this
Super
season?
Bowl.
Right.
Super Bowl.
They're making moves like they think that they're a Super Bowl team. And if I squint, I'm like, okay, I can see how you would have convinced yourself of that if you're inside the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I just think that Aaron Rodgers, I just think he's through as like a viable NFL quarterback. You know, that is my hang up with this whole thing. I think the drama, the sort of collective anxiety that he seems to cause in a locker room and on a sideline, the pressure that he puts on his coaches. Mike Tomlin, I think, is one of the best head coaches in the NFL. I'm not even sure that Tomlin can manage all of the junk that comes along with Aaron Rodgers. And it's clear the Steelers think that they're going to be good. So if we're sitting here at the end of the season talking about the Steelers being a real contender to make a push in the playoffs, I wouldn't be totally surprised by that. But I'm actually going to say that I think this is the first season where Tomlin has an under 500 record. I haven't looked at their schedule to see. I think they have kind of a tough schedule, if I remember correctly. So I'm not saying that I'm totally out on DK Metcalf, but there's just such a huge range of outcomes for where the Steelers could go this season. I could see it being an absolute train wreck by like week 7. And then you're just like, what do I do with DK Metcalf? Or either Jaylen Warren or Caleb Johnson, or either of those guys startable? Like you seem like you disagree with me. I want you to talk me out of this.
I think I'm going to be on the other side. I'm wrestling with it. We're still in early July. I'm a huge Tomlin guy. I'm also a huge DK Metcalf guy. I think his skill set and ability is through the roof. We know the body type. I like a big wide receiver. Give me a big wide receiver. And so we also know that Aaron Rodgers loves to hone in, like when he gets his guy. So there's one guy in Pittsburgh. Yeah. And I think Metcalf can handle double teams as well. And so I think you have to throw to somebody. I think they're going to run the ball. So I think the running game with Arthur Smith and 2 tight ends, this is going to be a ground and pound, play tough defense. They're going to love it. They're going to make games tough. Rodgers, they're not going to ask him to make a ton of throws. He doesn't like making a lot of mistakes anyway. He doesn't really like throwing turnovers, so he likes the safe throws. Yeah. I think the safe throw is going to be to DK. He's going to be the recipient of a lot of touchdowns. Not that this is going to be some high-powered offense where they're scoring 30 points.
No one expects that.
But I just think it's not going to be one of these offenses where it's spread around. It's going to be to DK. He's the guy. And you can get him at a pretty good price, I think. And I think a lot of people will side with your narrative. So I'm going to zig on that or zag on that.
He's what his ADP has been.
And so I'm leaning toward Metcalf. Now, I'm not going in on Rodgers as a quarterback I want in fantasy, but I do want Metcalf.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure of that. As soon as that trade was made, I was excited about Metcalf.
I like Metcalf. That'll be fun. Yeah, that'll be fun, I guess, to see which one of us is right on the Steelers this year, because I think I'm way out on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
That's fair. We'll talk running backs next week with them. And then the Cooper Kupp, I'm intrigued by. I feel like he was in such a good spot with the Rams that they maximized his ability. I'm not sure that translates with Seattle. I've been a huge Cooper Kupp fan. I remember one kind of keeper dynasty league. I had him early and got to enjoy the rise of Cooper Kupp. I'm not sure I'm going to have a lot of Cooper Kupp this year.
Yeah.
But JSN, he proved how good he can be. Last year was a big breakout performance for him. And I still feel pretty good about him. I'm afraid you're going to have to pay a little too much of a premium to draft him, so I'm not sure that I'll be drafting him a ton. And that leads to the next conversation as far as off-season moves. The quarterback carousel that took place, really involving Seattle. So Sam Darnold leaves Minnesota to sign with Seattle. Geno Smith gets traded to the Raiders. And now J.J. McCarthy gets to be the guy in Kevin O'Connell's system that Sam Darnold thrived in last year. And McCarthy gets to throw to Justin Jefferson. So it's a pretty good gig that you get to throw to one of the top receivers in the league. But what do we know about McCarthy? I mean, I still go back to, we didn't see that much at Michigan. Yeah. He did not throw the ball very much. So I'm not willing to buy in. Now, you can buy into O'Connell and you can convince yourself of Justin Jefferson, but I can't do it with McCarthy yet. Yeah. I got to see it to believe it. To me, it's too big of a leap, too big of a risk to take. So I'm sort of out on the Vikings passing game. That's why I'll go Jordan Mason running game with the Vikings. And then, if you listen to the show last year, I was so out on Sam Darnold and looked like a fool the majority of the season. And then I finally looked right in the final two games of the year. Now, the playoffs didn't affect us fantasy-wise, but the last, down the stretch in the fantasy season, fantasy championship, he let you down. It probably didn't even get you there. So I'm out on Sam Darnold as being some kind of guy in Seattle. I think he'll take a step back. I don't think he'll be as good as he was last year in the Viking system. And I think Geno will probably be about the same. Like, he's the last few years has been a solid mid-tier quarterback. I think he'll be that. Like I've already told you with Jacoby Myers, I think there'll be enough production there. Pete Carroll, solid offense. Geno will be fine.
Yeah, I think of all the quarterbacks you just named, Geno is the only one where I feel pretty certain I know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
I think any one of those other situations could turn into a real disaster, As it pertains to Darnold, I mean...
Or McCarthy's the next guy. It seems unlikely to me, but maybe.
I think that is unlikely. And Kevin O'Connell is an incredible coach and seems to be a good developer of quarterbacks. So, I hope for the best for J.J. McCarthy in real life, but I'm not going to have him on any teams in fantasy football this season. I officiated a wedding this summer where Sam Darnold was a guest and talked to him.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And I didn't want to be like fantasy guy, but I did. Hey, how are you liking Seattle? JSN's pretty awesome, man. Fun. It's gonna be fun to throw to that guy. Darnold was a super nice guy.
Okay,
I really like him. He didn't give me his phone number or anything. I know he's not listening to this, so I can say that I think he at times in his career has seemed to have had confidence issues, and I think if things don't start off well there in Seattle, the Seahawks drafted this guy Joe Milton. That's like not Joe Milton. Who
Patriot.
No, who's the
they trade
the Alabama the dual threat quarterback?
Yeah. Jalen Monroe.
Monroe, yeah, sorry, Jalen Monroe. Yeah,
Jalen
you're
Monroe?
Right. Milton is in New England. Jalen Monroe,
and they haven't traded
Milroe. Not
okay. There we go.
We got there.
Hey, we got to get the rust off.
Clearly, I've been paying a lot of attention to this guy. No, Milroe is the kind of guy where fans are going to start to get antsy if the Seahawks start off on 2-3.
You're right.
Let's see what we have with this kind of new Ferrari that we've drafted. And I don't think Milroe is going to be that good as a quarterback either, but what he can do is run the ball from the quarterback position. So there's a scenario where things go downhill a little bit quicker than we expect for Sam Darnold. I hope that doesn't happen. I would feel okay taking those Seahawks wide receivers around where they're being drafted ADP-wise right now. But the only quarterback that we just talked about that I feel any degree of confidence with is Geno Smith.
Yeah, low expectations, but enough. He's good enough to make your boy Brock Bowers relevant, and Jacoby Myers, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
We got a couple other guys on that roster to talk about too. But so you were the pastor for the wedding. You were the
yeah.
Okay. So what was your strategy getting a picture with Sam Darnold? Did you get one?
I talked to him a few times. I did not end up getting a selfie with him.
Was he a groomsman or just in attendance?
His girlfriend was a bridesmaid.
Okay. So he's in the inner circle.
Yeah. Talked to him a little bit. He was a super nice guy. It was a smaller wedding. I think he probably would have taken a picture with me. I don't think that would have been a big deal, but I just didn't get that opportunity to jump in. He was always near the bridal party. And my rule generally as an officiant of weddings is if people notice you, you probably did something wrong, right? So in general, you should be facilitating a joyful day for the important people who are involved.
Don't make it about you.
Right, don't make it about you. And so, I may already be bad at that without trying to get selfies with the NFL quarterback who's present there. So talked to him a couple times, had a good conversation with him. He was really nice. I hope to see him succeed. I hope to see him succeed. But
okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I don't think I'll have him on many teams this season. So maybe I'll have him on one just because I met him and got to talk to him. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Very, very cool. I'm not sure I've been at a wedding with an NFL guy, so that's fun. That's unique. Yeah. All right. So my big off season, I met Luke Kuechly. So that was fun.
Nice.
That was a highlight. Football fan. So. Last thing, and then I want to leave us with some off-season homework or prep work. And so last thing, is there a coaching change from the off-season that grabbed your attention, that you're buying into, sort of a new regime, fantasy-wise, it's going to be a difference? The obvious one, there is already momentum building for this, but I am on the bandwagon. I never got off the bandwagon. Mike Vrabel. I think Mike Vrabel is a really good head coach. I thought the whole situation in Tennessee just was weird to me, and the fact that he was out of football for a whole year is crazy to me. Anyway, he lands in New England. Are you kidding me? New England's back. They're back. We were finally able to move on from New England, and they had a couple down years. They are back. And I wasn't Mr. Drake May last year, going into the draft or going into the season. But I saw enough. I think there's enough fantasy production there. And then you throw in Mike Vrabel. I'm in. And you can get Drake May at a good price right now. So I like Drake. I like the rise of the Patriots. And then next week, I'll tell you what running back I love in New England as well.
Yeah, all right.
But that's the coach for me, Vrabel.
That's a great, I went to UNC Chapel Hill and saw Mitch Trubisky, saw Sam Howell, saw the high expectations for those guys, and just thought, is Drake May just going to be another run-of-the-mill UNC guy with high expectations who underperforms? And I think that I believe in him. What I hear about sort of his preparation, his background, makes me more confident that he's going to succeed in the NFL than some of these other Carolina quarterbacks who have come out in the last decade. So yeah, I love that one. In terms of trying to figure out, it's a very congested skill position room, right? I think they have a lot of good to sort of middling skill players, running back, wide receiver. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out from a fantasy perspective, but from a real life football perspective, I think they're going to be good. I'll just say, I think you're dead on with Pete Carroll, similar to the Harbaugh effect with the Chargers last year. I just think a culture guy who comes in and gets people excited to be on the team and be playing football again. And I think Carroll is that kind of guy. And then I'll say that I believe that Ben Johnson is a true offensive savant in the NFL. And the players are there in Chicago for him to create an offense that is really dynamic. Obviously, Caleb Williams is the huge question, but I like some of the early stuff that I've heard about his development and how the offensive players have bought in. So I think that could be another one where we say, man, things were just, the coaching situation was just abysmal in Chicago last year, and look what this team is capable of with a really competent offensive mind at the helm.
It seems like a no-brainer. Like it all seems,
maybe it's too obvious.
That's part of my hesitation. Is it almost seems too good to be true. That, man, is this all really going to work for Chicago? And will it all come together this year? I'm a little curious why they didn't beef up their running back room more. They got so many receivers, tight ends. They've got the weapons in the passing game. We'll see what DeAndre Swift can do. I'm going back and forth on him and even Roschon Johnson. But
could DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson be like Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, like discount, right? It's super discount. But I think it's similar dynamic there where you've got kind of the thunder and lightning thing going. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the Chicago Bears. I guess people have been saying that for a long time.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Yeah. I think Ben Johnson is a good enough coach that I think I'm going to have some of those guys on my team for sure.
All right.
I might take a crack at Caleb. I might do something crazy and take a crack at Caleb Williams on one of my teams this year.
You got to probably pay a little bit for him, but
do you think people still believe? I know
think there will
in
be
Dynasty
enough.
people still are in on him. I think in your casual redraft fantasy league, I kind of think people are going to be like, this guy didn't amount to anything. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's fair. That could be true. All right, so there's some thoughts. We've only scratched the surface, but we've got weeks before training camp, and then also preseason, the whole summer, as we will walk this journey with you in preparation for fantasy drafts and the fantasy season. Join us next week, and we'll begin our breakouts as we'll talk about forgiveness. And so each week we'll have a spiritual thought, encouragement, faith and fantasy combined. And so be on the lookout for that. Make sure you go to fantasyfootballfellowship.com, become a member for free today. So be sure to get your own membership, encourage your league, your church to be a part of it as well. And the final thought that I want to leave us with today is getting back into the swing of the fantasy season. Or it's like, all right, it's summer. I'm a big NBA guy. So it's like, all right, I got to turn off my brain a little bit from NBA free agency and the draft and the finals. Now it's time to go all in on fantasy football. And so if you're like me, you're making the shift, where do you begin? Because it's somewhat overwhelming. It's like, all right, I got to start all the fantasy prep and the knowledge and all that. Here's what I'd encourage you to start with. Go look at the depth charts. NFL depth charts. Get an idea of, okay, know the names of players, know what teams they're on, and know kind of where they're starting at heading into training camp. Plenty of training camp battles that we'll have to keep an eye out for. But know where those battles are. Know where all the free agents went. Know where the draft picks went. So that's part of the process too, is looking at depth charts and then going, okay, I don't know that name. Oh, that's a draft pick. Oh, that's a new signing. That guy was buried on another roster last year. Now he's getting an opportunity. He's third on the depth chart, on this team. So be familiar with all of that. If you haven't already, make sure you know not only where the new head coaches are at, the new coordinators. Mm-hmm. Who are the new coordinators? Who's calling plays? Who's calling the plays in Houston? Is Houston going to be better? They fired their offensive coordinator. Will that be a change for them this year? And so know that. That's where I would begin. Understand, what QBs have new weapons, how that's going to affect them, what weapons have new QBs. So start there, and then, as the offseason goes on, then you can really dive into rankings and ADP and that kind of thing. So anything to add?
I mean, I like to look at, we all know there are a million great fantasy football podcasts. This one is obviously the best, but there are other great fantasy football podcasts out there. I like to just peruse the headlines of the fantasy football subreddit. So r/fantasy football on Reddit. I don't even get deep dive, like what are people commenting, but just taking a glimpse at the headlines there usually gives you a pretty good idea of like what are the stories that people are paying the most attention to right now during the off season. So yeah, I'm with you. Understanding where did other players end up? I pay attention to this stuff pretty regularly, and still I'm like, oh, yeah, this guy's over here now. Like Rico Dowdle's a Carolina Panther. I'm excited about that. Using the Reddit algorithm that kind of brings the most interesting and compelling stuff to the top that's a place I like to read.
Yeah, and no, it's good. Twitter's key for me as well. Signing up for some of those newsletters, fantasy newsletters has been helpful for me. Keeping up with some of the news, and even though like nothing's actually, well, I shouldn't say nothing. Very few news items happen this time because everybody's off and vacation, and people that I know in the NFL world, they're on vacation and don't try to talk to me, that kind of thing.
Darkness retreats.
But
ashwagandha.
But there's still news that comes out that's actually a backlog from OTAs and mini camps in June. Like those stories are coming out. And some of those guys are doing podcasts and interviews and articles are coming out where you can glean some news from that. So that's another thing to keep an eye out for. So there you go. Episode 1, we're back. It's the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast. Thrilled to be with all of you and thankful for Tripp. Glad to have him back on the show as well. And as we kind of wrap things up, again, fantasyfootballfellowship.com. We'll be with you each week. The shows will drop on Tuesdays. We'll be live as well in a couple of weeks where you can comment and leave your thoughts and all that, ask questions as well. So we're grateful for your support, grateful for your involvement. I'm Bryce. He's Tripp. We're fantasy managers who follow Jesus. And we hope that you understand the truth of the good news that Jesus died on the cross for you and I, that he was resurrected, and that by faith we can be saved because of his grace. And so I hope that you will join me on this journey as fantasy managers who follow Jesus together. Have a great rest of your day. I hope you're enjoying the summer, and we'll talk to you next time right here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast.